Good morning to you. It's about 20 after 5 right now on Friday morning. It's July 11th. Um, I have to, after I finish this up and publish it out there on YouTube, I actually have to get in the car and head off to my office today, so I have to wear the collared shirt in the office. Today happens to be a pink shirt day. Oh well, it was its turn in the rotation. Uh, Today's going to be a little bit different because I'll talk about the latest book, the latest splatter western, but I'm not going to really do this one with notes today. And one of the main reasons why is this story, and I'm not putting it down by saying it with these words, was just a story. You know, read it beginning to end, remembered a lot about it, but there wasn't much in it that sparked off some kind of critical thoughts and ideas I had. So you're not going to see me popping like little pictures up over here saying, oh, this is like that. And here's an example of what I did like. Here's an example of what I didn't like. And it looks like a few other things I've remembered in my past. So today's going to be pretty much a synopsis of the story. And I'm going to just bring you along to what some of the setup is and where it's going. I will do what I normally do and try not to make any spoilers in this. So we're going to have a good time. I'm not sure if it's going to be even a long one. And I know at the end I do have one small criticism, but we'll get there. Okay. Without further ado, this is All Your Dreams Will Come True When You're Dead by John Wayne Comunale. And I'm going to assume that's how you say his last name. I know I read in the foreword and I think even the afterword, he talks about people making fun of his name. I guess being a John Wayne, especially if he's writing a splatter western. So I don't know if it was a sensitive topic for him or not, but he kind of alluded to this story's told because you made fun of my name. So I don't know where to go with that one, but it was a thing. I'm actually kind of curious how this is going to fit when I title this project on YouTube, because that's a long name, that's a long title, might not have enough characters to fit it all, but that's my cross, my burden to bear. So where should I get started with this one? So a bunch of this story takes place in a town called Cocytus, or Cocytus. I don't know how to pronounce this one either. It's Cocytus. And this is not an ordinary town. It's a place that people are gathering to, or more specifically, are being gathered to. Someone doesn't stumble upon it unless they're meant to be there. It's I don't want to call it mystic, or it's not a fantasy town. It just happens to be a town that was created for a purpose. Someone who has, a cattle train going through the lands isn't going to stop over here. The mail doesn't go there. There's nothing about this town that someone will be able to find. Again, unless I said they're meant to be there. And it's run by a certain man who actually has a purpose for the town being there. What he's trying to do is he's trying to draw chaos to the town in such a way that it might even send a beacon that might draw another entity to it. So how does he do such a thing? Well, one way he goes about it is he actually has, he's recruited a woman to work with him. In fact, in the cover, this is the woman here. Okay, pale skin, always wears this thing over her mouth, is very silent, never says a word. But she happens to be some kind of mentalist in a way. She has ways of, I don't know if you want to call it witchcraft or something like that, but she can sense things and send out thoughts and receive them as well. So she's able to actually pinpoint people in the world that fit the bill that would add to the chaos of the town. And he uses her in order to be the spokesperson to the 3 outlaws that he has that actually do the wrangling and get the people into the town. These 3 outlaws go by the name of the Calamity 3. And each of them is just a ne'er-do-well, As they say, how well do they do? Nair. They do nair. Outlaws that rob banks but then kill people along the way for no reason. They'll take their ill-gotten gains and then find the nearest tavern and get as many prostitutes as possible, get blind drunk, and kill people along the way as well. They're just, evil men that have been recruited for this purpose. So in this town, you have these three guys will then go out, find the soul they need, and bring them back into the town. The other souls that I talk about, and I keep saying souls, but they are people. They're not dead people, whatever else, that do find the town happen to fit the bill of this chaos bringing in a way. So as I said, people don't just wander upon the town. They can if they happen to be the right person that is meant to find this town. Okay, so you have one aspect of the story of sending out the outlaws, have them grab who they need to grab, bring them back into the town, then they become part of the town. And just by their very presence or the way they act within the town happens to feed this darkness. It feeds on this negative energy that's trying to create a nexus that'll be so strong, so loud, it will be heard by another. So that's one aspect of this story. Later on, you start realizing that this Calamity 3, while when they return to town with the person that's necessary to feed the town, they don't recall ever getting there. And when they're in their downtime and they're getting banquets of feasts, they're getting top shelf liquor, they're going to bed with 3 and 4 women the whole time that they're in their downtime. If they ever stop and just start thinking about it, they're like, do you remember how we got here? And they're like, yeah, weren't we on this job and then there was a dust storm and we got lost and turned around and showed up here? And then the second person would say, well, I remember being in a dust storm, but that was during some other thing that we were doing. And I remember we went to sleep that night in shelter and then woke up here. And the third one might not remember a dust storm, or maybe he did, but it was long before and he had memories afterwards and he showed up. So there's a confusion about their origin in the town of Cocytus, if that's how you say it. And whenever they start going down this route in their minds and in their conversations, they then start to become befuddled and never reach a conclusion. So they never remember why they're there. And it's interesting because as they start doing this, it starts feeding to them like, hey, we should kind of like rise up against our master because we're not in control anymore. It's like, yeah, we're comfortable, food, drink, women, you name it. We have nothing to worry about, but we're not in charge. So then there tends to be like a seed of doubt and mistrust that fuels them as well. There's 2 other aspects of this story that happen. In the second one, there is one of these people who kind of stumble... Excuse me. Oh, God, I hate when that happens. That gets to the town. And he's a gunslinger. And not only that, he's a gunslinger that has what he considers a very special gun. It's a very unique gun. I think it's called a Lamat. And this one actually has like 2 barrels on it. One that would shoot the regular cartridges, and I think one that shoots like a shotgun kind of shell. I think its production never got popular, not very many of it, but when he found it, he fell in love with it. And he has a very unique attachment to his own pistol, which I'm sure some gunslingers and pistoliers had in general. But he's loving this gun. He actually makes it part of his own soul. But when he shows up in this town, and he doesn't know how he got there, it's missing. So he feels like there's a piece of him missing. Then he encounters a stranger, which is the only one he even sees in the town. He's looking around. There's no one in the streets. There's no law. There's no citizens. There's not even a dog going around. what is going on with this empty town. But he does run into a guy who kind of tells him, listen, you're here for a purpose, but we got some rules in this town. I can't tell you the rules, but you got to follow them. In fact, you got to go across the street into that gambling hall, and that's where your journey starts. And if you want to find your gun again, you'll go in there and do what the man says. At that moment, the guy just wants to pull out his gun and shoot him, but lo and behold, there's no gun in this holster on his side. So, as he gets in there, he kind of gets brought into listen, follow my words, you'll get your gun back. But you have to go through a bunch of trials. Go through that door over there, and you start. Otherwise, say no, leave here, and you'll probably be killed. And I'm totally paraphrasing this conversation here. So he goes through the door magically disappears behind him, and he finds himself kind of back in the same town, but now there's people walking around and milling, and there's animals, there's horses, there's stagecoaches, and you name it. And he finds a little dwarf who's kind of aberrant against him and says, listen, you have to go through a whole bunch of trials if you want to get your gun back. And they're all shooting trials, so you'll love this being the gunslinger you are. And he just slowly but surely he takes him on one challenge after another, each one being practically absurd. And this gunslinger has to go through and work them all out. It starts out very quick where he gets like a small little Derringer. Think like not even a 22. And he's got one shot in it. And he looks down range and it's like, okay, there's a target like 40 yards away. But this 22 only shoots about 20 yards. So he has to come up with a way of how am I going to hit the target with one bullet from this range and get through it. Other things happen too where gives him a rifle and there's a cactus way down yonder. But the thing is, on the other side of the cactus, there's a flower. And he has to find a way to shoot that flower off with the rifle from here, one shot. And there's even a great one too where he's at the range and behind him there's a tin can sitting up on a ledge. And he has to find a way to fire down range but hit the can behind him. So he's really being put through his paces saying, listen, you got to do all these challenges if you want your precious gun back. And the whole time he's doing this little dwarf creature is just mocking him, getting in his ear, almost getting him to a point where he wants to use his one bullet try to shoot the dwarf. And while it's not really going to kill him, because of, again, splatter westerns have a supernatural thing. And by the way, this one is loaded with supernatural front to back. He'll waste his bullet and lose the challenge. And then there's a third storyline where you've got a youth in a town and the mother's around, but the husband hasn't been around for a while. He goes out and does some outlawing or does some wrangling and then comes back with money and then goes out again for a while, and it's all back and forth. So the wife doesn't really know how to farm. She doesn't know how to ranch or do cattle. So she's kind of dependent on him coming back every now and again with the spoils. But she starts going to town, she starts drinking, spending a lot more time in there, and the kid's left at home most of the time. And then her drinking ends up turning into whoring because she has no money anymore, really. So she turns tricks, gets the money, buys booze, vicious cycle, once in a while returns home. And then the booze becomes opium, laudanum, that kind of thing. Gets into hard substances, drugs, things of that nature. And now she's hardly ever home, and the boy's got to fend for himself. And while he's searching around the house for things to eat or things to sell or whatever else, he does come across his father's old gun. It was a Colt. I think they called it like a lawmaker or a peacemaker or something like that. And then he kind of learns, he finds some bullets, and he starts learning and teaching himself how to shoot and becomes pretty damn good at it. And on one trip, he gets some stuff, he walks into town trying to sell it to get some money to buy some food, he does run across a woman by herself on a horse and meets up with her, and she kind of like takes him in a little bit because she ends up being a little bit of a witch herself, like a good witch in a way, and she senses that this boy has a great future ahead of him, but unfortunately also has a horrible demise coming. So she's going to do everything in her power to cultivate him and try to make him avoid his fate. And doesn't really trick him, but gets him to come under her employ, that she'll pay him for, his production, maybe help him in her herb garden, which she uses on her little potions and whatnots, and then they'll develop a relationship of some sorts. So that sets the stage for like the three stories that are commingling in this whole novel. And John Wayne Comunale actually does a really good job of writing this stuff down and taking you along, and try this one more time, and taking you along on this journey that you can actually enjoy everything that happens there. And you realize later on how these different story threads get intertwined and work together to culminate to the magnum opus, the finale, the climax, or whatever have you. Now later on you start learning about this whole town and how it's trying to like grab together all these souls to make this beacon of a sort to lure something, because our big baddie that kind of runs the town, he's actually come from this other dimension. And in that other dimension, I don't know if he created more, I forgot the reason why from the top of my head, but he like created too much chaos, or he upset the order, or whatever happened, that the entities of which he is one of in this world or dimension actually ostracized him. They cast him out. They put him into exile. And in his exile, he landed upon this earth. So all he wants to do is get back to that. He hates having a body and living on a world and that kind of stuff. He belongs in this ether type zone. And while they closed all the doors of him to return, they didn't close doors of other entities coming to him. So his whole motivation of this is get one to him, it'll piggyback him out of here, and he'll be back among those types of people. And there you have it. I mean, I'm not going to do a long one today because, like I said, it was just a story that went into some good details about what is this mystical town, what's the motivations of the people, how do we get through this. It even goes into more details of, our big baddie who picks his little seer of a woman witch to help him out, how he selected her. Oh, my stomach is just growling because I have not had breakfast yet. She remembers it as, she was lost and whatnot, and he came and found her and fed her and brought her along. He knows the truth of, he hunted her out, took her from her other people, and made her his. And just seeing their relationship actually described it, in her head, in his head, as they're remembering what goes on, is a fascinating read. You really have a good time as you go through this. I really don't have much more to say about this. Like I said, there's nothing that when I read this was like, and let me go down a rabbit hole with segues and asides and what have you. This just was a decent book to read. It really had a self-contained story separated in different sections. You got to really explore each of this section and go along for the ride. So, it's going to be a short one today. It's only about 20 minutes right now. If I go into the critique aspect of this, it had its moments of editing, which I'm not a fan of in this genre or this publisher. It happens. The only thing that really caught my eye, which is a writer problem, not really an editing problem, but an editing process should have found this, was the good witch along the way has the name of Carolyn, or maybe Caroline, or whatever else, he flip-flopped between two different spellings of it. Carolyn with a I, or Caroline with a Y. And when I noticed this, I'm like, wait a minute, which is it? And I actually would flip back in the book and find other chapters that were there, and that's an I, that's a Y. So I was just annoyed to see that. Yet, it's something I am used to with this. The only thing that really pops out was when the gunslinger was talking to the dwarf at one point. I think this was the scene. They were saying, oh, this is kind of par for the course, that he uses the word apropos. But not so much the regular spelling of apropos as one word. He did it like the French spelling, where it was like an A, accent, space, propos. And then you realize that this gruff and, just this gunslinger that's of the earth and dust and dirt and whatever else was using words like the French version of apropos and déjà vu and that kind of stuff. So it was an odd, it kind of awakened to me, like, why would this guy think in this vocabulary? That's not that kind of a character. The writer is using appropriate words. He's actually very correct in what he's saying, but it just didn't seem like the patois of the character that was saying it or thinking it at the moment. So that was a little possible slip. Possible I'm just criticizing too much, but... And that's all I have for today. Like I always say, you be your own judge. If you like these kind of stories and you haven't read this one before, pick this one up. Get through it. I don't mean that to sound negatively. I mean complete it, not get through it. Alright, that's all I have. I'm not going to waste any more time for you or for myself. Enjoy yourself, and I'll come back with the next splatter western, which should catch me up on all the splatter westerns I've read, and then I might be one step closer to being completed with all my work on my desk. Alright, you take care now. Bye-bye.